The galaxy was restless. Tensions burned like hidden fire across the stars as rumors of war spread between humanity and the mighty warrior race known as the Dromak. Entire systems whispered of their strength, their brutality, and their towering champion whose name alone brought fear to fleets. It was said this giant alien warrior had shattered moons, broken armies, and humbled kings with the swing of his blade. The Dromak were not a people of negotiation or diplomacy. They were a people of strength, and to them, strength was the only law worth following. Now, standing above all else, their greatest champion declared a challenge. Humanity, new to the galactic stage, would not face extermination in endless war. Instead, they would face a single duel. If their chosen champion triumphed, the Dromak would yield. If he failed, humanity would be crushed, their colonies turned to ash, their fleets scattered like dust before a storm. It was a spectacle like no other, broadcast across the stars. Billions across hundreds of worlds turned their eyes to the announcement. Every race watched, eager to see if humans, those fragile creatures of flesh and bone, could ever stand before a monster bred for battle. Many already laughed. Many already dismissed them. A single duel seemed almost merciful, for in the eyes of the galaxy, humanity's defeat was certain. Yet when the time came for a champion to step forward, no mighty general appeared. No soldier clad in polished armor, no cybernetic warrior enhanced for battle, no genetically designed fighter came to represent them. Instead, one man walked forward. His name was not sung in songs. He carried no great reputation, no aura of legend. He was an ordinary human, simple in appearance, unremarkable to the point that even those watching thought at first that perhaps this was some kind of joke. His frame was average, his armor plain, his weapon little more than a standard-issue blade. Yet his eyes, dark and unyielding, carried something no one expected, courage so sharp it cut through doubt. Across the galaxy, there was silence, then mocking laughter. The Dromak warrior sneered, his towering form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the human whole. He stood nearly 3 times taller, his skin a metallic sheen, his armor forged in fire and battle, every scar a reminder of countless victories. His voice rumbled through the arena as he growled that this duel would be short, that this little creature would fall before the first strike. Billions of viewers waited for the inevitable. The crowd roared, betting credits, duels, even their ships on the alien's triumph. The arena itself was colossal, built to honor combat. Its walls echoed with the cries of thousands of alien spectators, their chants shaking the ground as they demanded blood. High above, drones hovered, capturing every angle for those watching across the stars. The duel began. The alien warrior moved like a living storm, his blade cutting the air with deadly force, his steps pounding the ground like thunder. The human barely dodged, rolling to the side, his movements clumsy compared to the elegance of his enemy. Yet he did not fall. Strike after strike came, each one carrying enough power to split steel, and still the human endured. He moved not with strength, but with instinct, ducking where another would have blocked, sidestepping where another would have been crushed. The crowd jeered at first, mocking his cowardice, but then they grew quiet. This fragile creature was still standing. The alien's attacks grew faster, heavier, a dance of destruction meant to overwhelm. But with every swing, with every earth-shattering blow, the human found space, just enough to survive. His chest heaved, his body bled, but his eyes never looked away from his enemy. That gaze unsettled the giant. He had fought countless warriors, all of them fierce, all of them strong, and all of them broken by fear when they saw his power. But this human, this insignificant being, refused to bow. Between strikes, the alien slowed. Something strange stirred within him, a curiosity he had not felt in centuries. He wanted to understand this courage. Why did this fragile creature stand when even titans had fallen? The human stumbled, a cut across his arm, bruises already darkening his skin. Still, he rose, his blade trembling in his grip. His voice was hoarse, but his words cut sharper than any weapon. I will not kneel. Not today. The arena fell silent. The crowd that once mocked him now leaned forward, caught in the gravity of that simple declaration. The alien warrior froze, his towering frame still, his massive weapon hovering in the air. For the first time, he hesitated. The fight continued, but it was different now. The alien no longer sought to crush him like an insect. His strikes were measured, deliberate, as though testing the limits of this strange human spirit. And the human answered with every ounce of willpower he possessed. Blooded, battered, but unbroken, he pushed forward. Blow after blow, he survived, his endurance a weapon in itself. The galaxy watched, and slowly, voices began to shift. Where there was once laughter, there was now awe. Where there was doubt, there was now belief. On distant worlds, species that once mocked humanity began to cheer for the man who refused to fall. Then, at last, the alien warrior raised his weapon high. It shimmered under the arena lights, a symbol of countless victories, a final strike that could end it all. But instead of bringing it down, he let it fall from his hands. The weapon clattered against the ground, echoing louder than any battle cry. He looked at the human, his deep voice rolling across the arena. "This human," he declared, "has more courage than any warrior I have faced." And then the impossible happened. The giant alien warrior bowed. A hush fell over the crowd, then a roar like thunder followed. Across the galaxy, billions watched in disbelief as one human's courage bent the pride of a giant. It was not strength, not size, not power that won the day, it was the unshakable spirit of one ordinary man. And as the news spread across the stars, one truth became clear: humanity was no longer just another young race in the galaxy. They were something more, something unpredictable, something that could inspire even giants. This was not the end. It was the beginning of legends. The arena was still shaking with the echo of that bow. Billions of voices across the galaxy had witnessed it, and none could believe their eyes. A Dromak warrior, the mightiest of his kind, had lowered his head before a human, a species mocked for its fragility and weakness. The broadcast screens replayed the moment again and again, the giant alien's weapon falling from his hand, the sound of metal striking stone ringing like thunder through the silence. On human worlds, people cried with joy and relief, some falling to their knees in disbelief that their kind had survived. On alien planets, rulers and commoners alike stared in stunned silence. The Dromak had never shown mercy, never shown respect. For centuries, they had crushed all challengers and silenced all voices with their brutal strength. Now, one human's courage had changed everything. But what truly disturbed the galaxy was not only the outcome of the duel. It was what came next. The giant warrior turned to the crowd of his own kind, raising his hand, his voice deep and steady. "This fight is finished," he said, each word carrying weight. "This human is not my enemy. He is my equal." The arena erupted into chaos. Some Dromak roared in protest, their pride wounded, demanding blood and the human's head. Others fell into uneasy silence, unsure how to react when their greatest champion declared honor for a creature they had always despised. The cameras captured it all, streaming the confusion, the anger, the disbelief across the stars. Meanwhile, the human who had fought stood trembling, his body broken with wounds, yet still refusing to collapse. His face was pale, his breath ragged, but his eyes remained locked on the giant. He did not flinch even now, even in victory, as if he understood that this moment was not an end but a beginning. The galaxy leaned in closer, holding its collective breath, sensing that history was being rewritten before their eyes. In the seats above the arena, alien leaders and envoys whispered among themselves. The duel had been meant as a humiliation, a warning to the human race. Instead, it had turned into a legend. Some leaders already debated whether humanity could no longer be dismissed, whether their stubborn courage made them dangerous allies or dangerous enemies. The human's name spread across channels, repeated in disbelief by news anchors, printed on headlines across distant colonies. Yet in the middle of the storm, the man himself felt none of it. He only felt the pain in his ribs, the burning in his lungs, the warm blood dripping down his arm. Every part of him screamed to collapse, to give in. But he stood, because he knew one truth: if he fell now, the symbol of courage would shatter, and everything he had fought for would die with him. The alien warrior, still towering above him, studied the human with strange eyes. For the first time, the galaxy saw something in those eyes that had never been there before: respect, even admiration. He reached down and lifted the human, not with violence, but with a hand as careful as a father lifting a child. Gasps rose from the crowd as the warrior raised the human high for all to see. "Look at him," the warrior roared, his voice echoing through the arena. "Small, fragile, wounded, yet unbroken. This is courage. This is strength." And for the first time in history, a Dromak crowd fell silent not from fear, but from awe. Outside the arena, chaos spread. News reports scrambled to capture reactions. Some alien worlds condemned the warrior for dishonoring his kind. Others praised the duel as a turning point for the galaxy. Among humanity, hope bloomed like wildfire. A single man had shown that even the weakest could stand against giants. The human government, watching the broadcast from Earth and colonies alike, realized that they had been handed a weapon more powerful than fleets, inspiration. But the Dromak were not united. Many of their leaders demanded vengeance, furious that their champion had bent the knee to a lesser being. In private councils, they argued that the duel was a stain on their honor, that war must still come. Yet others, touched by their champion's words, hesitated. If even he could see value in humans, perhaps there was something worth considering. The galaxy trembled on the edge of change. And through it all, the ordinary human who had stood against death became a legend without meaning to. His name, once unknown, spread like fire into every corner of the stars. To some, he was a hero. To others, a threat. And to the giant alien warrior, he was something greater still, proof that courage could be larger than any blade, stronger than any army, and brighter than any empire. But the story did not end in that arena. It was only the first chapter. Because in the shadows, where no cameras reached, enemies whispered. They saw not honor in this duel, but danger. They feared what humanity might become if given time. And so, even as the galaxy cheered, even as billions celebrated, dark plans began to form. For if one human could inspire giants, what would happen when an entire species learned the true weight of its courage? The arena lights dimmed slowly as the duel ended, but the echoes of that moment did not fade. Across the galaxy, screens still replayed the image of the giant alien lowering his weapon, the human blooded but unbroken, the bow that shocked the stars. The crowd inside the arena, though restless and divided, could not deny what they had witnessed. Some shouted in anger, demanding the fight resume, screaming that the honor of the Dromak had been broken. Others, quieter yet steadier, stared at the human with wide eyes, whispering that perhaps they had underestimated this fragile species. The human stood swaying, his knees weak, vision blurring, but his spirit refused to break. Each breath was agony, but he forced himself to remain upright, aware that billions of eyes were still watching. He did not know what the galaxy thought of him in this moment. He only knew that falling now, collapsing into the dust, would undo everything. The alien warrior loomed above him, his armor glinting with light, his massive frame radiating strength. Yet his eyes were different now, no longer filled with scorn or bloodlust. Instead, there was something new, a curiosity that almost looked like wonder. He studied the man before him, so small, so weak, yet carrying a heart that refused to yield. For centuries he had crushed foes without hesitation, yet this human had made him pause, had made him feel something unfamiliar. Respect. The alien's voice rumbled low, meant only for the human though the microphones caught every word. You should be dead. But you are not. Why do you fight when there is no hope? The human raised his head slowly, his lips cracked, his face streaked with blood and sweat. His voice was rough, but steady. Because giving up means we are already dead. The words carried across the arena, translated instantly into dozens of alien tongues, and when the crowd heard them, a wave of silence spread. The alien warrior stared at him, as if those simple words struck deeper than any blade. For the Dromak, strength was always measured in muscle and weapons. But here was something they had forgotten, strength of will. And the galaxy could feel it too. Reporters scrambled to capture every second, their voices trembling as they described the human's defiance. On alien worlds, children gathered around screens, asking their parents how such a fragile creature could stand against a giant. On human colonies, people wept with pride, believing for the first time that their race might not just survive, but matter among the stars. Yet in the shadows, in the high seats of the arena, powerful Dromak leaders whispered among themselves. To them, this was no miracle, no inspiration. It was humiliation. Their champion bowing to a lesser being was an insult that could not be forgiven. Their eyes burned with anger, and their voices hissed promises of vengeance. Even if the giant warrior accepted the human as equal, not all would agree. The duel had not ended the danger, it had shifted it into a new and uncertain storm. Meanwhile, the alien warrior made his decision. He lifted the human once more, gently, and raised him high for all to see. This is not weakness, he declared, his voice shaking the very stones. This is courage. Let the galaxy remember it. The crowd roared, divided in fury and awe, but his words could not be ignored. They echoed into every corner of the stars. From that day forward, the human's name was no longer unknown. He became a symbol, not just for humanity, but for every species that had ever been dismissed, every small race ignored by the powerful. The legend was growing, and legends had power of their own. But as the human's body finally gave in, and darkness closed over his vision, the galaxy continued to burn with questions. Who was this man, really? What had given him the courage to stand? And what would happen now that the balance of power had been shaken? In secret halls, enemies prepared their answers. They would not allow this fragile creature to inspire the weak. They would strike before humanity could rise further. And so, even as the galaxy celebrated, danger grew unseen. The duel was over, but the true war was only beginning. The galaxy had not been the same since the duel. The moment the alien warrior bowed had spread like fire through the stars, replayed 1,000,000 times on 1,000,000 worlds. On human colonies, statues were already being carved of the man who stood against the giant. On alien planets, songs and stories whispered about the fragile creature who had earned the respect of a monster. Yet for all the awe and admiration, there was just as much anger. In the dark council halls of the Dromac, leaders pounded fists against stone tables, their voices filled with fury. They called the duel a disgrace, a shame that poisoned their honor. Their greatest warrior had bent his head to a human, and such an act, to them, was betrayal. Some demanded the giant be punished, exiled, or executed. Others wanted war, not against humanity alone, but against all who dared to cheer the human's courage. Yet their champion refused to bow to their demands. He stood before them, unarmored, unafraid, and declared that he would not renounce what he had seen. This human fought with no strength, no power, no glory, he told them, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. But he fought with courage. And that is something we have forgotten. If you cannot see it, then you are blind. The council erupted in outrage, but the galaxy outside was listening, and his words only spread the legend further. For humanity, the duel became more than a survival story, it was a beginning. Once mocked as fragile newcomers, humans were suddenly respected, their voices demanded in galactic councils where before they had been ignored. Traders from distant worlds came to their colonies seeking alliance. Soldiers from weaker species looked to them with new hope. The name of one man had become a shield for his entire race. But legends attract enemies as much as followers. In hidden corners of the galaxy, powerful groups whispered, plotting in shadows. Some were Dromac lords hungry to erase the humiliation. Others were rival empires who feared that if humans could inspire giants, then soon they could inspire rebellion among their own subjects. It was not long before the first attempt came. The human, still recovering from his wounds, was kept in a secure medical chamber aboard a neutral station orbiting a quiet star. The alien warrior himself guarded him, his massive presence enough to keep most assassins away. But one night, as the human slept, silent machines crawled through the vents, drones with blades, sent by unseen hands. They slipped past guards, their sensors fixed on the fragile body lying in the bed. But before they could strike, a shadow fell across them. The giant alien was already waiting. With one sweep of his hand, he crushed the first drone like a toy. His roar shook the walls as he ripped another from the air and smashed it into the ground. Sparks and smoke filled the chamber, alarms blaring, guards rushing in too late. The human woke to the sight of his protector standing amidst the wreckage, his eyes burning with fury. "They will not touch you," the alien growled, his voice low and heavy. "Not while I still breathe." News of the attempt spread quickly, though the details remained hidden. Official reports claimed a simple malfunction, but whispers of assassination ran wild. For many, it was proof that the galaxy feared what the human represented. For others, it was proof that his survival was dangerous. The human himself sat quietly afterward, his body still weak, his mind filled with questions. He had not asked to become a symbol. He had not wanted to carry the weight of a galaxy on his shoulders. And yet, when he saw the giant standing over him, vowing protection, he understood. This was bigger than him now. He could no longer step back. Meanwhile, the alien warrior felt something he had not felt in centuries, purpose beyond battle. He had lived his life breaking armies, crushing foes, serving a code of strength. But for the first time, He fought not to conquer, but to protect. And that choice set him against his own people, against the council that once worshipped him. Already, whispers of rebellion grew within the Dromak ranks. Some young warriors admired his choice, seeing in it a path different from endless war. Others sharpened their blades, preparing to kill him and the human he now defended. The galaxy trembled between admiration and fear, between hope and hatred. The duel that was supposed to decide humanity's fate had instead opened a storm that no one could control. And deep within that storm, two figures stood at its center, a fragile man of flesh and blood and a giant alien of steel and scars. Together, they had changed everything. But the shadows were closing in, and both knew that their greatest battles were still to come. The galaxy had grown restless. Weeks had passed since the duel, yet the image of the human standing blooded and unbroken refused to fade from the minds of billions. His courage had become a story told in taverns on mining colonies, in classrooms on distant worlds, and even in secret whispers among slaves who dreamed of freedom. His name had become larger than himself, and the weight of it pressed down on him every day. He was not a soldier, not a leader, not even a man who had ever sought power. Yet now he was being called a hero, a savior, a symbol of something far greater than he had ever imagined. The alien warrior, his protector and unlikely ally, remained by his side always. The bond between them grew deeper with each passing day, a silent understanding forged not in words but in the fire of the arena. The giant had fought 1,000 battles, but for the first time he was not feared as a destroyer. Now, when the two walked together through the station halls, crowds parted in awe, some bowing, some cheering, others whispering in fear. The human felt their eyes always upon him, and though doubt gnawed at him, he knew he could not shrink away. He had become a flame, and that flame could either guide or destroy. At last, a moment came when he could no longer remain silent. Leaders of several races gathered in a great council chamber aboard the station, their voices sharp with debate, their faces marked with suspicion. They argued over humanity's place among the stars, whether this sudden fame meant they deserved a seat among the galactic powers or whether they were still nothing but children. Some wanted alliance, others demanded humanity be silenced before their courage spread too far. The human was invited to stand before them, though many expected him to fail, to tremble and stutter before their gaze. He rose slowly, his wound still healing, his steps unsteady, but his eyes never lowered. The chamber fell quiet, thousands of voices dying into silence as he reached the center. His voice, though soft at first, carried with surprising strength. "I am no king, no general, no legend," he began, his words simple, his tone steady. "I am only a man who refused to fall when a giant told me to kneel. And I tell you this, not because I seek glory, but because courage does not belong to the strong. It belongs to anyone who chooses to stand when all others bow." The chamber rippled with murmurs, some scoffing, others leaning forward to listen. He continued, his words growing sharper. "The galaxy has been ruled too long by fear. Fear of giants, fear of empires, fear of those who claim strength gives them the right to decide who lives and who dies. But courage is greater than fear. And if humanity has proven anything, it is that we may be small, but we will never be silent." The alien warrior stood behind him like a shadow, his massive form silent, but his eyes burned with pride. For the first time, the human felt the power of his voice reach across the chamber. He saw doubt flicker in the eyes of leaders who once dismissed his kind. He saw curiosity in the faces of those who had never given humans a thought. And he saw fear not of weapons, but of ideas. Because courage, once lit, was hard to extinguish. The speech was broadcast live, carried across the stars. On colonies where miners worked until their bones ached, workers stopped to listen, some wiping tears from their eyes. On alien planets where weaker species were oppressed, whispers turned into chants, quiet voices daring to believe that if one human could defy a giant, perhaps they too could stand against their masters. The galaxy shifted again, and the ripple became a wave. But the wave carried danger. Not everyone wanted this courage to spread. Even as the speech ended, even as the chamber erupted in divided shouts, shadows moved outside its walls. Assassins sent by those who feared his words prepared their strike. They carried weapons laced with poison, their blades designed to pierce even the armor of the alien warrior. They had been promised wealth, power, freedom from punishment if they succeeded. As the human left the chamber, exhausted but proud, the assassins made their move. Silent and fast, they darted from the corners, blades flashing. The crowd screamed, chaos erupting in seconds. But the giant alien moved faster. With a roar that shook the chamber walls, he intercepted the killers, his massive arms smashing one into the floor with bone-shattering force. Another leapt at the human, but the man ducked, his instincts sharper now, his survival burned into him by the duel. The alien crushed the last two with a fury so brutal that even the guards stood frozen. Blood stained the floor, and silence fell once more. The human stood trembling, his breath heavy, but alive. He turned slowly to face the watching leaders, his voice shaking but strong. "This is why courage matters," he said. "Because fear will always come for us. But if we stand together, it cannot win." The galaxy saw him not only as a survivor now, but as something greater, a leader, unwilling though he was. And as the alien warrior stood beside him, drenched in the blood of assassins, the galaxy understood that the bond between them was unbreakable. Yet in the shadows, far beyond the chamber, darker plans were forming. Enemies had failed today, but they would not stop. For every cheer that rose across the stars, a blade was being sharpened in secret. The duel had begun a story, but this new courage threatened empires. And empires did not fall quietly.